All right. Hello and welcome. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our December 8th, 2021 meeting of CB11's Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee. My name is Andrew J. Padilla, and I am the vice chair of the committee. Tonight, I'll be filling in for our chair extraordinaire, Elsie Encarnacion, who's dealing with some urgent family personal matters. This meeting will be called to order at 6:35. Tonight, we're joined by District Manager Angel Mescane, the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe some ground rules. First, no one may speak until they are spoken to. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear, and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. Such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Again, all that chat conversation, it's not on the record, and we want to make sure that all of our comments are. The chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you may be having, or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated out loud on the record during the meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can mute yourself so that you can speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized. Okay, we will now take attendance by roll call. Board members, you can unmute yourselves and answer present when your name is called. Angel, would you like to call a roll?
Sure. Yolanda Brown.
Present.
Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Elsie Encarnacion. James Horton.
Present.
Ivy Hume. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Andrew Padilla. Robert Perez. Vinny Torres. Jason Villanueva. Candy Vasquez.
You.
You have quorum.
Thank you, Angel. I'll now ask a member to volunteer to take the notes for today's meeting. And you can do so by just hitting the raise your hand function. Jessica Elliott, thank you so much for volunteering to take the minutes for tonight's meeting.
You're welcome.
Okay. The minutes from our last meeting were distributed to committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes from that meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Only raise your hand if you object to the minutes that were sent to you before this meeting. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the last meeting are adopted. Do we have any informational updates, Angel, before we get to tonight's presentations?
We do not.
Okay. Our first presentation tonight, let me pull us up, is an informational presentation. Is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for proposed revitalization of the Delacorte Theater. This will be a 20-minute presentation. The applicant seeks a certificate of appropriateness from the Landmarks Preservation Commission for the revitalization of the Delacorte Theater in Central Park. The revitalization project is designed by Ernstead Architects and will provide upgrades to accessibility, theatrical requirements, and visitor experience within the existing theater footprint. The proposed alterations include the construction of ramps and the reconfiguration of aisles to improve access for the disabled, the replacement of theater seating, recladding, and reconfiguration of the theater's exterior wall and canopy, an enhanced signage program, the improvement of existing light towers, and the replacement of deteriorating fencing. But of course, y'all can get into that right now. I think we have Rosalind Barber here from the Public Theater to present.
Yes, okay for me to unmute myself and begin?
You already have.
Great. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm Rosalind Barber, the Administrative Chief of Staff at the Public Theater. And today I'm joined by my colleagues from Eniad Architects, Stephen Chu, Julie Rosen from Higginson and Quaysbarth, Omar Torovaca, Stephen Thompson, and Brianna Peppers from Kasira, and Valerie Campbell from Kramer 11, who are working with us on this project. For more than 60 years, the Public Theater has been a cultural and artistic destination and vibrant force for social change. Our work is driven by the belief that culture belongs to everyone, and we strive to make the Public Theater the people's theater. Each year, we employ hundreds of artists from more than 1,000 performances. We give away over 350,000 tickets and 1,500 free memberships, reaching an audience of more than 380,000 people from every zip code in New York City. Through our 6th theater home at Astor Place and our mobile unit, Joe's Pub, and Public Works programming, we reach audiences that are younger and more ethnically, economically, and geographically diverse than average theater goers. Specifically at the Delacorte, with over 6 decades of operation, which includes our most recent staging of Merry Wives, which you see a picture of here, as well as Much Ado About Nothing, starring Danielle Brooks, Hercules and Twelfth Night. We've given away more than 5 million tickets to Free Shakespeare in the Park. We are looking today at a Alt 2 style renovation to this facility. So we anticipate that this will make the theater safer and more comfortable for our artists, audiences, and staff, particularly those with disabilities, as Andrew mentioned. We will be streamlining backstage operations. We're going to revitalize the exterior because we recognize that there are many people that come to the Delacorte for Free Shakespeare in the Park, but there are many people that come through Central Park and experience Delacorte just as an object in the park. And we want to make it an additive experience for all folks who encounter the theater. And we want to improve the theatrical infrastructure because we believe that providing free performances that are at the same level that you might go pay $300 to see on Broadway is an imperative, and that requires consistent investment in our theatrical infrastructure. So we're taking into account that the Delacorte, which you can see here with the yellow dashed line, is located within a scenic landmark. So much of our work is considering the design in that context near Belvedere Castle and the Great Lawn. This is the theater as it currently exists. It's outlasted its usable life in almost every measurable way. And the renovation of the Delacorte is not optional. The deteriorating structure is in dire need of rebuilding to provide safer and more comfortable conditions for staff, artists, and audiences alike. And it lacks modern back-of-house theatrical operations and does not ensure equitable access for those living with disabilities. This is a preview of the design that we're proposing. The design is contextual and maintains much of the Delacorte's current form, footprint, and views within the park, while protecting the sanctity of the theater in a park experience and creating a contemporary design aesthetic that better reflects the natural setting. Before we dive into the design, we're going to share a brief history of the site and surrounding area and the precedents that we use to inform the design. And I'm going to turn it over to Julie to speak more about that.
Great, thanks, Rosalind. Good evening, everyone. Before I move into the history, I did want to just clarify that we are seeking a resolution from this committee as we are going to the Landmarks Committee, the Landmarks Preservation Commission at the end of January to present at the public hearing. So we are looking for a resolution from you. So Rosalind, if you can go to the next slide, please. So the two images on the slide, we have existing on the left and proposed on the right, summarize just a brief discussion I'd like to present regarding the historical background and the appropriateness of the proposal you'll be seeing today. And the proposal renovates the existing theater as it has been renovated twice already. It keeps the semi-cylindrical shape of the theater, the existing footprint, existing steel structure, existing trees and landscaping, and the existing lighting structures. But it replaces the existing deteriorated wood cladding with a new wood cladding, which has been textured to be more compatible with the natural textures of the surrounding park. It also solves design and technical problems with issues like lighting, seating, accessibility, and signage, but it does this with changes that are as minor as possible in terms of dimensions and materials. And while you'll see several examples of excellent park projects, which the Landmarks Commission has very rightly found appropriate, these examples have involved total replacement of existing structures with quite different, although compatible, new designs. But this is not the approach we're taking for the Delacorte Theater. While the design is updated and we think very much improved in many ways, this is not a demolition and a major new design statement. Rather, it's a continuation of a history of renovation and evolution, which has been ongoing at the Delacorte since its construction, as what we essentially call a pavilion in the park, and which we expect to continue into the future. Next. The Delacorte Theater site is located just south of the Great Lawn along the shore of the Turtle Pond. And this 1936 view on the left shows the location and park context approximately 30 years before construction of the theater. The yellow dot represents the Delacorte site at the very beginning of its evolution. And the rendered 1963 plan on the right shows the initial conceptual design and siting of the Delacorte with trees and paths surrounding the theater. Next. The original Delacorte Theater was constructed in 1961. At that time, it was a very simple building, a wooden outdoor arena set on a minimal steel structure and clad on the exterior with patterned plywood. From the beginning, there was a large metal lighting bridge that extended far above the seating enclosure. The theater was intended to be celebratory in nature, with a textured wood facade, flagpoles lining the top of the seating bowl, and lighting throughout. Next. But by the mid-1970s, the theater was already beginning to deteriorate from continual exposure to the elements. These photos from 1974 show the worsening conditions. There was water damage, rotting wood, and deteriorating metal, all visible in these photographs. But we can't see the failing systems or the inadequate equipment and facilities for theater production, but we do know that they were there. So less than 15 years after its original construction, the Delacorte already required a major renovation. Next. In 1976, a renovation by architect Giorgio Cavalieri was undertaken, and it's shown here underway. Cavalieri took the theater down all the way to the steel structure and replaced all of the wood decking, risers, and exterior cladding. And the renovation also included a new exterior canopy and signage and major mechanical plumbing and electrical upgrades. So during this renovation, an almost complete rebuilding of the theater was required. Next. This 1976 elevation drawing shows the new vertical cedar cladding replacing the old plywood, as well as other new elements, including a new canopy, signage, and the installation of 4 new metal lighting towers set just outside the theater footprint. Next. Throughout the following decades, the celebratory nature of the theater remained very much intact. This photo shows the theater in full festival mode with large flags ringing the seating bowl and smaller flags suspended from the lighting towers. Next. But by 1999, the Delacorte needed yet another complete renovation. And the second overhaul, designed by architects Capel and Costow, retained much of the existing steel structure and lighting supports, but it again replaced almost all of the other elements of the theater, including the wood cladding, wood decking, riser, stairs, and stage. They also replaced the seating at this time and installed new concession areas and production and operation spaces beneath the theater, and made further MEP upgrades. This continued that tradition started in the 1970s of renovating the theater while adding upgraded features for theater production and patron use. Next. The existing views on this slide show the current state of the Delacorte after all of this evolution we've just traced. The building needed a complete renovation approximately 15 years after its original construction, and it needed another one approximately 20 years later. And now another 20 plus years have passed, and we are ready for the next step in the Delacorte's evolution. Next. In addition to deteriorating conditions of the exterior walls and decking, outdated systems and back of house spaces are also in need of upgrades to address operational safety. Next. To inform the appropriateness of the proposed Delacorte renovation, we looked at other park projects that responded to evolving programmatic needs of an existing facility. I will present 3 projects, 2 in Central Park and 1 in Prospect Park, that represent a variety of appropriate approaches that successfully integrate contemporary new buildings within a park setting. All have received LPC approval at the commission level. So the first that you can see here is the Central Park Zoo. The 1934 Amar Embry design is on the left, and the 1988 Roche Dinkaloo renovation is on the right. Changing standards for animal welfare and visitor experience meant that the zoo buildings and landscape needed to be substantially modified. And so this project represents a complete demolition and replacement of the main zoo complex west of the path between the zoo and the arsenal. It left only 2 1930 zoo buildings intact. Everything else was new, including connecting pavilions and colonnades that were designed in a park-friendly vocabulary of materials and forms. And several aspects of the zoo design, which made the project appropriate, are also integral to the design thinking as part of the Delacorte project. This includes the use of natural materials and modern architectural design to create a cohesive and contextual presence within the park. Next. The ongoing Lasker Rink and Pool renovation in Central Park represents a different approach to the rehabilitation of a mid-century facility. In this project, we have the proposed 2019 design for the Harlem Mir Center on the right with the existing on the left. This project entirely demolished the existing facility and will revert a large portion of the existing site to landscape. Next. In Prospect Park, the 1961 Molman Memorial Rink was replaced in 2013 by a strikingly modern facility designed by Todd Williams Village 10 Architects. The project completely demolished the existing facility, an exact contemporary of the Delacorte Theater, and replaced it with a major modern building which was clean, sophisticated, and completely of its time. All of these projects represent evolution and change within the parks on a large scale, and all are successful interventions, which have been very correctly found appropriate by the Landmarks Preservation Commission. But at the Delacorte, the renovation takes a more conservative approach. As you will see in the upcoming design presentation, programmatic and architectural issues will be solved in a new design that reflects both the theater's architectural history and its own time. And I'll turn it over to Stephen Chu from Iliad Architects to present the design portion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julie. The revitalization of the Delacorte is an opportunity to create a more accessible, comfortable, and flexible space that can better welcome visitors and support cultural productions, all while existing in harmony with the surrounding nature of the park. I'm going to run you through a deck of slides here, start with some exterior renderings, and then I'll go into some details and then finish off with some views from around the park looking at the theater. Okay, the exterior. Okay, the renovated Delacorte will have massing that is consistent with the existing theater. Instead of the flat clapboard siding of the existing facade, the proposed cedar wall will be vertically textured with various lengths of smaller scale wood cladding. The wall will play with light and shadow, changing with the sun angle, complementing the natural setting of tree trunks and overhead foliage. Next. The exterior wall will be canted outward slightly from the existing footprint at grade. This gives the theater a slightly enhanced presence while giving a bit more space in the seating above to achieve a more accessible layout in the grandstand. The new covered canopy and bluestone path will be increased to facilitate circulation and increase cover over the central approach. Building identification will be in shop metal finishes and at the edge of the canopy. Wayfinding is located within a discrete metal channel under the canopy soffit with temporary seasonal signage shown in these views. Here you can see the new lighting towers are shown here, replacing the existing in the same locations. There will be seasonal banners deployed at the 4 lighting positions. You can see these at these 2 locations here. These would be removed off season. Next. Here you can see a view from house right. We've actually removed a tree in the rendering above just so you can see a little bit more of the facade. The existing photo is down the lower right, and as you can see, covers a bit more of the canopy and facade than our rendering does. Next. Okay. The evenings in the park can be quite dark, and to assist a little bit in wayfinding, we're proposing a hint of uplighting on the wood texture above. That would be lit from the bottom, so as the wall cans out, it will catch the light but stop it from going up into the skies. Just a hint of light. The pedestrian path will be downlit from recessed lighting in the soffit under the canopy, as it does now, accompanied by a wash of light from the cane rail at the base of the wall. Next. The material palette is quite simple. The theater will be finished with simple materials: cedar, painted metal, wood decking, and a zinc canopy. The wood and zinc are durable materials appropriate for exterior use and will age naturally. Slight changes in tone are expected and welcome. Next. Plans and elevations. Other than regular annual pruning, we do not plan for any significant impact to the existing trees surrounding the theater. These are the locations around the theater. Next. Existing and proposed ground floor plan. The bluestone pathway will be increased 10 feet at the central access to the theater. This increased dimension will give theater goers proper space to approach the box office line and move either house right or left with the assistance of wayfinding staff. The running bond pattern will be retained, as you can see in the lower image there. The final layout of this plan, I want to note, will be confirmed once proper investigation determines the location of existing trees, critical roots. Next. Okay. Here you can see a roof plan and the grandstand plan. The canopy will also be extended just at the central portion of the plan to reflect the increased arrival path below. Next. Here you can see elevations. On the lower left there, you can see the slight cant in the wood wall. And in the upper unraveled elevation, as we know, it doesn't look this way because it's flat. The side walls would be flat. They do not cant out. Okay, accessibility. Okay, the existing accessibility at the Delacorte provides only one point of ADA access via a ramp at gate 1. Okay, this gives access to only the front row of the house for possible ADA positions. The existing egress is also challenged due to the seating within the cross aisle, which is blocked here in the existing configuration. There is no back of house means for accessibility currently. Next. The proposed plan alters the existing grandstand to better address both egress and ADA. As you can see here, we've cleared out the cross aisle completely so that it provides an opportunity for 2 new ramps to be built house right and left that would bring ADA access to the front row and to the cross aisle. We are looking at a possibility of up to 32 ADA positions, almost twice the number that exists currently. Okay. The other thing I will note is you can see here, by canting the wall of the exterior out slightly, we create the room to create another row of seating. This makes up for the lost seating that we've taken out in the cross aisle below. Okay. Back of house, we're looking at opportunities for both ramp, for a fixed ramp or potentially ADA lift locations around the stage, providing variation of options for a varied stage build out. Okay, next. Okay, here is a rendering showing the existing ramp and stair access to one side. It is symmetrical on and the proposed on the right, which rebuilds it and gets ADA ramps to both cross aisles. Next. Okay, the exterior wall canopy and signage. The permanent signage at the Delacorte Theater are dimensional affixed to the wood wall in the upper left. Those are the permanent signage elements at the top. Typically mounted on the wood wall, area locations will find wayfinding, changing seasonal signage, which has never really found a home or designated location. As a result, the signage has often been ad hoc and a bit visually random. Next. Here we have done looked at some of the other examples of signage within the park. Many are contemporary elements that are celebratory and integrate with the architecture and structures. Banners are often deployed on lampposts around park paths. Next. Okay, these are some details showing you the proposed signage types. As you can see here, the lettering would exist at the top edge of the canopy. There is the zone indicated in green here that would be temporary signage in that 18-inch high band, and the gate number would be permanent. The designation for the gate below in gray is actually just recessed wood into the texture of the facade. Okay, and then you can see the banner over on the left mounted to the lighting position. Next, here's an example of some seasonal graphics by Pentagram, and these would be elements that would be inserted in the temporary locations that I just showed. Next. Here you can see a during season mode and off-season mode to the right, the top with a couple of views, and the locations where those temporary signage elements would then go away off-season. Okay, and here's some exterior details. Here you can see on the right wall section, the dashed red line indicates the existing profile of the wall. The slight cant here affords us the ability to add another row behind. Because the rows do step, we do need to increase just 2 feet above. As you can see, the canopy is a slight bit taller and will have a projection varying from a minimum of 8 feet. Okay.
Just a quick note, 5 minutes. So
okay, thank you. Here are some details showing you the service windows, which include concessions and box office windows. We are proposing to put a fixed window that's operable for comfort and security of staff, as well as a roll down shutter in front of it that would be concealed in the head. Off season, we would have wood custom plugs that would be mounted flush to the facade. Next. Okay, lighting towers. As you can see, the existing lighting towers are being proposed to be this, the proposed lighting towers would be the same height as existing. The plan is slightly altered to accommodate more safety for the workers in operation and mounting of the light fixtures. There's a lot of challenges right now in terms of how they get lights up, how they position, and how they operate with staff up in there. Okay. Next, being proposed is that lighting towers 1 and 6 would be raised from a slightly lower height to match the existing height of the 4 surrounding towards the park. Next, here's a rendered view. Next, seating. The seating color scheme, in contrast to the existing monochromatic scheme, which you see on the left, the new seats will be a blend of colors which complement the colors of changing seasonal foliage through the year. Next, fencing. Here you see a plan indicating the existing fencing that surrounds the theater house right and left with the gates and the existing foliage. There is a porous nature to them. They are falling apart, so we will rebuild them. Next. And the proposed design is to have a more solid bottom portion. Often there's equipment right behind. As you can see, there's another fence built behind that fence. The idea is to simplify and consolidate into one fence that would keep that porous nature at the top portion of it and on the wood mounted to the gates that you see here on the left image. Next, here's some more views. Okay, and these are a series of renderings here that show the theater from the existing condition in summer and winter, and then the proposed to the right. From various vantage points around the theater. In the lower right is a small site plan. Here you can see from West Drive, which is lower in elevation, looking up towards the theater. Basically no change. The mass is the same. The lighting towers would be the same height, and that's are retaining that arched lighting position in the middle. Here you can see the proposed on the right. Next. Okay, now you're looking at it from the Great Lawn. And again, from the south of the Great Lawn, really no difference. And across Turtle Pond. And finally, from Belvedere Castle looking down. That completes the design presentation. Thank you.
And Rosalind from the public again, just want to thank you again so much for your time, and to state that we've been really proud to be able to work closely with New York City Parks on this design effort along with Central Park Conservancy. We operate the space through a license agreement with New York City Parks, and our colleague Katie Riley from New York City Parks is in the call today. So we're happy to be presenting this in collaboration with them.
Well, thank you so much, Rosalind, and to all the presenters. It was a very in-depth presentation. I got a very good vision for what that project's going to look like. And I would like to one day go. I've born and raised in New York, never actually made it out to the old one. So hopefully I get to go to the new one. Now they are before us here asking for a certificate of, well, a letter of support for the certificate of appropriateness from the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And so this is within our purview as a community board. And so we need to give our thoughts here. So we're going to have a short discussion and then we'll see if there's interest in a vote. In this discussion, I just want to remind folks, maybe this is your first community board meeting, right? When a member is given the floor to speak, I'll identify you and you can unmute. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand, same as board members through Zoom, and wait to be recognized. Members, just please hold all motions until the discussion has ended. So a discussion period begins now. Has anyone have any thoughts, questions, concerns? I see a hand from Candy Vasquez. Candy.
Hi, thanks for that presentation. It's been a long time since I've seen anything from that theater in a long time. And but I don't know if I heard anything about how, I know you're looking for support, but my question is, what are the benefits the residents of East Harlem are going to have once it's up and running? And what will be the accessibility of the residents, the local community based organizations having access to utilize the area should they want to have a play or rent it to have a dance exposition or anything like that? What will be the accessibility, and how will the community residents of East Harlem, have access and benefit from that?
Thanks for that question. So at the public, we operate a program called our Public Works program, where we work with communities in all 5 boroughs, and we put on a production specifically with community members. It usually includes about 200 folks from like age 3 to like age 88. And they perform at the Delacorte. Sometimes it's a 2-week pageant. Other times it's been like a full 5-week production. So that's the way that we ensure that the people of the city of New York are not only getting to participate as audience members, but also in the creation of the programming. We also do ticket distributions, not only at the Delacorte Theater itself, but with community centers throughout the 5 boroughs, and would be ensuring that occurs in Community Board 11 as well.
Beverly, I saw you had a hand up, but then it came down.
Yes, thank you. Actually, Candy, thanks for the presentation, and hello, everybody. Candy did ask the same kind of questions that I was concerned about, what the benefits would be to the community board residents. I also is concerned about from what you're speaking, is that it seems like every 15 to 20 years you have to do another rehabilitation or something for this theater. My question is, would the materials that you use now last more than those 15 to 20 years that you'll have chosen? And my other question was, I know you're making an effort to have more ADA accessibility to the theater for residents to view the shows that's going to be there. But do you have anything that's going to be for the stage? Do any thing that's going to be made to the stages where people that are ADA can perform on the stage itself? And those are my two questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to make sure those were clear for the record. I think the first question was about the duration of the materials used. Beverly stated that it had been, I think you said that it had been done every 15 to 20 years or so, from what I guess you'd heard here, and that you wanted to get an insurance or at least just understand how long these materials would last. Second question is on ADA, but I couldn't hear that second question. So Beverly, if you could just re-ask that second question and a bit louder, or yeah, just really. So the first question was just on the length of those materials. How long do they expect that they'll last for? And what
That's
was
correct.
your second question?
My second question is regarding ADA accessibility to the stage, in case people that needs that facility to be able to perform on the stage. Would there be any designed for that, so they would have access also if they need to perform on the stage?
Thanks so much, Beverly. Those are great questions. So I'm going to ask Stephen Chu to answer the question about the sustainability of the materials and a little bit about the ADA access. But the short answer to both your questions is yes, we're looking to use materials that will last longer than the materials have up until now. And yes, we're working to ensure that accessibility will be throughout the theater, including access to the stage. And Stephen will give a little more detail on that.
Okay, thank you, Roz. In terms of the materials, just to make it clear, the existing steel and footings are being retained in the structure. That existing steel structure is good to go for decades as long as it's well maintained. The new cladding, which is the cedar cladding on the exterior, cedar is one of the main options of wood that does live well in the exterior. It does silver and age, which is fine. It's a part of the design aesthetic that it age with time. And if maintained, that facade can last 20 to 30 years, but it does require maintenance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a question for informational purposes and I see your hand, Yolanda. For CBOs that would like to connect with the theater, what is the best way that they can, in fact, reach out to try and figure out what opportunities are available for their folks in this community to benefit from the services that are offered at the theater? Because I did you just contact the theater directly? Is there someone who deals specifically with CBOs, or is that outside your purview?
Yeah, I think contacting me and Andrew, I'll make sure that you have my email address, or info@publictheater.org works as well. We have a variety of programs through that are our community engagement programs. So would love always looking for suggestions from the community of folks who are interested in connecting in that way.
Great. Yolanda, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you
Yolanda
so
Brown.
much. Thank you for the acknowledgement. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's always good to know the amenities in the community and the programs that are associated with it. I have an elementary question. What is a certificate of appropriateness and who's requiring it?
Julie, can I have you answer that question?
Absolutely. Hi, Yolanda. Thanks for your question. A certificate of appropriateness is granted by the Landmarks Preservation Commission for scopes that require public review and review by the commissioners, which are a select group of professionals from throughout the city who review applications like this. So because of the scale of this particular project, the extent of the renovation, the project needs to go in front of the full commission at the Landmarks Preservation Commission for a vote. And as part of that process, we actually need to visit all of the community boards that border Central Park in order to get a resolution from them as well.
Okay, so part two to that question, if I may, Chair. All right, is what is the difference between a certificate of appropriateness and a letter of support?
Valerie, are you on the call? Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
Sorry,
There we go.
Valerie Campbell from Kramer 11, and I'm Land Use Council. We are actually getting a binding report because the Delacorte Theater is on city-owned land. That is, the criteria is the same as the certificate of appropriateness, though. So when the commission considers a binding report or a certificate of appropriateness, it is always referred to the affected community boards, and they ask that the community board issue a resolution regarding the application. We certainly hope that your resolution will be a supportive one, but it can be it could be a conditional resolution. That is really up to the committee to determine how they want to respond. The commission does like to hear from the community boards. So for all of the projects in there that they're reviewing.
yeah, so Valerie took the words right out of my mouth. We are not offering any certificate. We are offering a letter of support for the certificate. So that's up to us if we want to support that. Does anyone else have any other questions on the committee? Because if not, I'm going to move to the public attendees. Okay, so going to the public, Heather Leboeuf. Hope I'm saying that last name right. I'm going to unmute you. Oh, you're unmuted. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Heather Lubov. You did pretty well, thank you. I'm the executive director of City Parks Foundation, and we present summer stage all throughout the city, including in CB11 and Marcus Garvey Park, but we also present in Central Park, which is why I'm here today. But in my personal capacity, I'm here as a city kid that grew up in New York City and depended on the public theater and Shakespeare in the park to help me become who I am today, running an arts organization. So it's important to me both professionally and personally. I reviewed the plans with Rosalind earlier. We worked together, City Parks Foundation and the Public Theater, to bring free programming to parks around the city, including Shakespeare. And so we're really proud of that partnership. When I saw the plans that she presented, they seemed very appropriate to me. We had just gone through a full review and renovation of Summer Stage in Central Park. So I'm familiar with the requirements and am very sensitive to being a part of the park as opposed to standing out within the park. And I think that their plans have achieved that really well. I can attest to the question of 20-year lifespan, having just renovated our stage in Central Park. Our engineers and architects said the same thing to us, that 20 years is about the maximum lifespan that you can get of material that are out in the elements, which is what's happening in the park. So that seems very just and fair to me. And I'm very happy to hear about the increase in accessibility and safety compliance. So I just wanted to raise my hand and make that known, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather, for your comments. Does anyone else have anything to say before we end the discussion portion? Okay. We will now entertain a motion on this item. Does anyone from the committee wish to offer a motion with regards to this item? I see a hand from Yolanda Brown.
Yes, thank you. I would like to make a motion that we support this project. And we issue a level of support for their application for certificate of appropriateness.
Thank you, Yolanda. I see Candy's hand. Is that a second?
Can I add a friendly amendment to that? Yolanda,
Excuse me?
can I add a friendly amendment to that?
Oh, yes.
Would you entertain? So I would second it, but I would like to have it with conditions that the theater is available and accessible to the artists and entertaining groups of East Harlem. In other words, I don't want to support give you the letter of appropriateness. And then once everything is said and done, East Harlem residents and the artists and groups that also would like to have a space to be able to do any type of performances don't, have a hard time to get in, because oftentimes we've seen that happen. And then at the end of the day, we find ourselves, when I say we, is because there are other groups that will look for places to have any shows to perform at or anything like that, and they don't have that ability to have that, to utilize the space. And I would just like to see that Delacorte Theater would honor our residents and our up and coming and existing community groups. Now, I'm not talking about community centers. There's a different setting. They have enough of their own, they're well taken care of. But I'm talking about the CBOs or even groups and artists that, even directors that do plays on their own independently, that they will have access to that, and that you will allow them to utilize the theater for it. And I hope I'm making it understandably clear what I'm trying to say here.
I think for the purposes of making a friendly amendment, we would just need specific language. So what is the specific language?
The specific language will be the letter of support with conditions that the theater is available and accessible to the local artists and entertaining groups in East Harlem, that they can be able to utilize it and it'll be honored, without giving them a hard time or closing the doors at them. That's all.
I feel all of that. But could you just repeat that one more time, but like stop, because I know it continued. If it's just, and make sure it be honored so they don't close the doors on them. I mean, if that's part of the text, then that's fine.
Okay,
But
so
I
let me
just
just
want
say
to,
it-
I just want
let
to
me
hear
say
the
it
text, and then we can hear,
Yes,
then we can hear if Yolanda approves of that text, and then we can move forward as accordingly. So I just, what is the exact text that you would like her to add in the friendly amendment?
I would like to add that the theater will make itself available, right, and accessible for the local artists and entertainers of East Harlem to be able to utilize the theater.
Okay, to utilize the newly renovated theater. Okay, so I just want to be very clear before I ask if Yolanda's okay with that. I'm just like typing it out myself. We'll make it approval on the condition that the theater will make itself available and accessible to local artists and entertainers of East Harlem to utilize the newly renovated theater. Okay, Yolanda, is this a friendly amendment you're okay with?
Not clearly. I'm not sure how to proceed, what the formality is here on this. I agree with the concept, but understanding the model of the public theater, unlike swimming pools, the public theater is not necessarily a public facility. It's a public facility, but it's one that's the programming and the development of programming is usually done at the public theater level. So I think more importantly, it might be worded such that there are collaborations for projects that will include local artists and community residents. Understanding again what the public theater is like and the organizational structure of the public theater.
Okay.
So is there wording that you two feel comfortable with?
Well, having shared that, I'd like to hear back from Candy.
I'm fine with that, as long as, I can get a commitment from the whoever is the one that's gonna be running the location, you know, I mean, we could, case in point is just that we have a theater in East Harlem, and right about now, not everyone has access to it the way they should have. And I just want to make sure that this won't happen. You know, it won't repeat itself again, you know? So I just want to make sure that that the commitment is there. And I understand, Yolanda, there is a public, it is a public theater and there are guidelines. But as long as it's adhering to the guidelines of our community as well, that it can, you know, uniformly, that we can all work collaboratively. But it's like, it's something that's the commitment is gonna be there once it's already said and done.
Okay, okay.
I just don't want you to come and we saying, yes, we're gonna give you the support. And then later on, it doesn't work out to what we agreed upon. That's all.
Okay.
So I'm fine.
And so with that amendment, I would like to recommend that in place of access and usage, that will be in collaborative programming with the local artists and the community residents.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just, for the sake of clarity, want to understand. So will make itself will collaborate in its programming with
Yes.
local artists and entertainers of East Harlem. So okay, so it is a letter of support for the certificate of appropriateness with the condition that the newly renovated theater will collaborate in its programming with local artists and entertainers of East Harlem.
The community access, with community access.
Right.
And that should do it.
Okay, to be clear, I believe that is what Candy had said, and then I think there was pushback from you on that, but now you would like access to be added in there as well. Is that correct?
No, there was pushback for me. There was clarity, just understanding for what the public theater or corporation or organization model is like. So I'm in agreement, but I felt that it should be at the programming level.
Okay.
Meaning that there'll be collaborative projects that will include local artists and entertainer with access for the community, East Harlem community residents. So something will have to be set aside or targeted, or making sure that there is ample opportunity for the local residents to
okay.
partake.
So we have the person here who Rosalind, who actually does deal with those CBO opportunities. So I think if we write access, I believe that their response will be, we have that. Assuming, but you're saying, but the specific collaborate in its programming with local artists and entertainers of East Harlem, I don't think that they have any commitment to that online. I don't know if they have to, but that's what you're saying that you would like. I think if we could put access in it too, if you'd like. Although I would just, I think Rosalind said earlier that they do have those, but when you say access, do you, what does that mean for you?
So access,
Go ahead, Kim.
What I mean by access is giving them, like, let's say one of our local residents they write a play, right? And then let's just say Eugene writes a play and he's looking for a location where he can actually have his play, utilize a theater. You understand? He is local, he's from the residents. And so therefore, instead of going to getting our closest doors because no, there isn't any access, no utilization of it, I want to make sure that they're going to be accepting and also giving access. By that, I mean, letting them use the location to have a theater or a play done there. Let's just say KRT3 wants to make a dance display, do the anniversary, and they want to then do a showcase of what they've been doing with the whole community as a whole, and they want to utilize the location, then let's make sure that they're going to give them that access. They're going to leave the doors open for them to be able to utilize the space as well. You know, it's just, but it's gonna be for the public. But I'm just saying that just giving them an opportunity to showcase their work and their talent.
I understand that. So I just want, okay, so I think this
That's
is
what
what
I
I'm
mean
hearing
by
from you. Right.
access.
I just want to have clear language so we can procedurally
So
move
I
forward.
understand.
Okay, so on the condition, so approval on condition, they commit to on commission, they provide access to and collaborate in programming with local artists and entertainers of East Harlem in the new theater. So they provide access to the theater and collaborate in collaborate in programming with local artists and entertainers of East Harlem. Is that what the two of you were saying? So are you two on the same page?
Yeah, yes, I'm on the same page, but I like to have the emphasis on the collaboration because that gives you your greater access. So collaboration and programming and community access, something of that nature. So
That
just
they provide access to I'm sorry, I don't understand that it's on the condition they provide access to the please give me language that you would like to.
The language there, I just think it should be in the reverse. So what was it that you just read off to us?
So on the condition they provide access to the theater so I'm actually just trying to incorporate this really quickly. Okay. On the condition they provide access to the theater for local artists and entertainers of East Harlem, collaborate in programming with local artists and entertainers of our community.
Okay, I'll settle for that.
Okay. Okay. So this is now a motion with a second for approve. This is to approve with the condition that the theater that they provide access to the theater for local artists and entertainers in East Harlem. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I read this clearly. This is a motion for approval on the condition that they provide access to the theater for local artists and entertainers of East Harlem and collaborate in programming with local artists and entertainers of our community. Is that what the two of you have asked us to vote on? Okay. There's a 1 and a 2. There is a motion and a second. I don't want to break out of procedure, Angel, because Rosalind has her hand up. Angel, would it be out of procedure for me to just have her clarify, just so that we can have a clear motion? Would that be?
That's your call. It's okay.
Okay, Rosalind, do you have anything to add before we move forward on this?
Sure. I just wanted to offer that. So we operate the Delacorte through a license agreement with New York City Parks Department, which does have some strictures around how the space is used and how the space is occupied. So I think certainly, as I mentioned, we do produce collaborative work that is within the Delacorte with community members that include community members from CB11 every year. So I think that the collaboration that Yolanda and Candy have both mentioned is definitely achievable and something that we've been doing for a long time. But I just didn't want there to be a misconception that we, the public theater, are able to sort of rent the space out to other organizations, because under the terms of our license agreement, that's something that we don't really have control over. But we do make we do have a commitment that is ongoing to ensure that folks from the community are working on our stages and backstage and attending all of our shows. And that commitment would definitely remain. It's at the heart of why we exist. So that would, I can say hands down, would not be change as a result of this renovation.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. We have a motion on the floor and we have a second, so we will now go to voting. Angel.
Yolanda Brown,
Yes.
Jessica Elliott,
Yes.
Elsie's not here. James Horton,
Yes, absolutely.
Ivy Hume, oh, it's not here. Beverly Pabon,
Yes.
Andrew Padilla,
Yes.
Robert is excused. Vinny is absent. Jason's absent. Candy,
Yes,
the motion passes.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your clarifications and thank you for your presentation. We do appreciate it. And I know that we at the committee will be following up just to, understand more what is offered that our community can plug into.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is this is, we don't have anything to vote on, but I think this is one of the more interesting presentations any community board committee meeting is going to get this month. George James is going to give us a presentation on the Fair Share program. This has been, all the issues this touches on have been really kicking off this week, but have been of serious importance to our community since before I was born. So we're excited to have George give his presentation and explain a bit more about how this program has worked in the past, how it technically works now, and maybe what it could look like.
Cool, thank you. Angel, could I share my screen? There we go. All right, so thank you, Andrew. Last week, Angel asked me to prepare a little talk on fair share environmental justice. And I really appreciated it because, putting this together, I learned an enormous amount. I mean, I knew a little bit, I knew some of the basics of it, but there's a long history of fair share in New York City. And, conceptually, it started in 1989 when we amended the charter to include a consideration for fair share when citing city facilities. So, what does that mean? Fair share should, this is essentially from the charter, further the fair distribution of the burdens and benefits associated with city facilities. That is, 1, consistent with community needs for services. 2, efficient and cost-effective delivery of the services. And 3, which considers the social and economic impacts on the surrounding area. This is in City Charter sections 203 and 204. It's still there. So the city produces this thing called the citywide statement of needs. And it's produced because of the fair share requirement in the charter. This citywide statement of needs identifies new facilities the city plans to site and existing facilities the city plans to close or reduce in size. It has the new ones that are accepted for comment, and then it has ones that were proposed in previous years and their status. The borough presidents and the community boards, you can comment on the citywide statement of needs within 90 days. The city publishes these comments in full every year. This is the report that had the comments from the borough president and community boards on the citywide statement of needs. And this is all of them, which if you look, there's not one single comment from a Manhattan community board or the Manhattan community or the Manhattan borough president. There's 2 borough presidents commented and 6 community boards commented. That was it. Importantly, I think in 2017, let me also go back here and just say that there really weren't that many projects. There were only like 22 or 23 projects in this statement of needs, and only 2 in Manhattan. So that may have been one of the reasons why there weren't so many comments. Okay, so in 2017, City Council studied how fair share was working, and they published this report, Doing Our Fair Share, Getting Our Fair Share. This is a really, really great report. It's not that long, it's like 38 pages long, but if you exclude the appendices, it's really only like 20 pages long. And what it's found is that fair share was failing. Community boards and borough presidents were not receiving something that's known as a fair share analysis. That is this analysis the city is supposed to do whenever it's citing one of these facilities that qualifies for fair share analysis. And in fact, not only weren't they receiving it, it wasn't even being done. And then they were finding that sometimes the report, the analysis, is only done after somebody foils it. Meaning that somebody says, I want to read that report you had to prepare. And they're like, oh, we didn't prepare it. So we got to actually write it now, which is, that's a problem. That's a big problem in the process. We also found that that things weren't getting better, right? So in response to, if you have a rule that you need to have fair share, and the distributions of these facilities aren't getting better, well, that's a problem. And this report used East Harlem as an example, a little call-out box on residential beds. And it was finding that East Harlem hosts 5% of the city's shelter beds, 19% of the New York State's cities. So the New York State has facilities in the city. There's 19% of the substance abuse beds, and 11% of New York State's mental health beds. So there's a real concentration of residential beds. It's not #1 in the city because of Rikers Island, which also counts as residential beds. So it made all of these recommendations, and most of these, they're common sense. I'm not going to go through them all, but I am going to talk a little bit about these 4. Okay, and so, oops, sorry. Require more capital projects to be included in the citywide statement of needs. So as I said, there are only 22 projects and only 2 in Manhattan in last year's statement of needs. The city projects that are subject to fair share, there's very few of them. Much smaller than projects that are in the capital plan. So, like for instance, the capital plan is enormous and spends, there's a plan for spending billions and billions of dollars, and we only have 22 projects in the statement of needs. Should the statement of needs, or should their fair share, consider things like investments in infrastructure improvements? Are they fairly distributed throughout the city? Investments in affordable housing. Is more affordable housing funding and projects going in this district than that district? Investments in new schools. Fair share doesn't tell us any of that, right? It doesn't tell us distributions of how the city spends its money. It just tells us where these very specific uses are going. Okay, and then so the idea here is prohibiting the unfair sightings in highly overconcentrated districts. So this was number 9. So the city is able to cite facilities in overconcentrated districts by using emergency procurement, which is exempt from fair share. And if you read this report, it said it all time and time again that communities like East Harlem are getting more shelter beds. Even though it has more than its share, and it does that because there's an emergency going on and people need homes, and this is a place where the city is able to cite them. Council thought that was wrong and introduced a bill to prohibit that. Advocates likely killed the bill in the 2017 bill because of this very provision, number 9 here. Coalition for the Homeless said that the bill would, quote, create new barriers to the siting of facilities serving vulnerable New Yorkers and even prohibit the opening of such facilities in some communities altogether without making it easier to site them in other neighborhoods. So they were very worried about, how do you address homelessness if you can only open shelters in some areas and not others. Okay, and then number 10, mandate fair share criteria as binding rules, not guidelines. And so the way fair share analysis work is the city just needs to examine fair share. It doesn't need to follow fair share. The only time the court ever found a city project couldn't proceed because of fair share was simply because the city didn't do the analysis. And when they were caught and they didn't do the analysis, they didn't go back and redo it. The court just required the city to go back and do the analysis. And once they were done, the project proceeded. Because they're not required, it's not binding, right? They can concentrate things as much as they want. They just have to study it. Oh, and then number 6 was to call upon New York State to adopt a similar fair share system. So New York State doesn't have to follow New York City law for anything. The city can't govern the state. And this could lead to concentrations of New York State facilities contrary to fair share. However, New York State must consider environmental justice when taking certain actions. So environmental justice, what is that? Environmental justice is the fair and meaningful treatment of all people, regardless of race, income, national origin, or color, with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So this map right here shows all of the environmental justice areas in Manhattan, and nearly all of Upper Manhattan is a environmental justice area. But environmental justice has very limited application in New York State and mostly involves projects that DEC has to issue a permit. Well, what are those? Like, all right, if you're filling in a wetland or messing with the coastal areas or power plants. That's one like what they call a fixed source emission for air quality. That's one where we actually see them doing environmental justice studies, but also waste hauling and a few other things. None of the stuff that fair share, or very little of the stuff that fair share covers. So now, a few years ago, council passed a law that required New York City develop its own environmental justice policy and report. And so it is in the process of doing this to study environmental justice, and it's writing this report. And this report may very well lead to changes in policy. So the report that they're writing, the Environmental Justice for All report, it will assess engagement between city agencies with the New Yorkers they serve, with a focus on engagement with historically underserved population groups in EJ areas with respect to environmental decision-making. The assessment will cover formal, legally mandated engagement around environmental decision-making and land use. So it will likely be broader than what the state does. So, but in summary, in practice, fair share, I think, is full of good intentions, but it has very limited applicability and no teeth. But if you're concerned about concentrations of certain facilities in your community, fair share is a formal way for the community board to make, and anyone in the community, to make their voice heard. New York State environmental justice has more teeth, but it has much more limited applicability. It is possible that the city's EJ effort that's happening right now fills some of the gap, but it's still very early in the process. So the 2017 Fair Share bill died. It did not continue after it was introduced, but parts of it were folded into the 2021 Comprehensive Planning Bill. And some of you may remember we had people from City Council talking about the Comprehensive Planning Bill. And those parts included expanding the statement of needs into capital planning. That was one of the things that the Comprehensive Planning Bill wanted to do. Identify needs on a citywide basis and assign targets to each borough and community district so that everybody was carrying their fair share. Again, that was very much coming from the 2017 Fair Share Bill. The Comprehensive Planning Bill is a focus on equity in every community district doing their part, share the benefits, share and the burdens of change. But the Comprehensive Planning Bill also appears to have died. I don't think it's going to get out of this session. But you know, these things have a way of coming back, and I expect that these ideas, and I'm sure comprehensive planning is going to come back in the coming years. I don't, maybe next year, maybe 5 years, but it's going to come back. So, you know, one thing before I go into this next part, I wanted to say this is that I had hoped to show a lot of maps here today, showing how these facilities are distributed throughout the city. Unfortunately, I couldn't. So the 2017 Fair Share Bill has a lot of great maps in it, showing distributions of different facilities. The city has a facilities database with all of these facilities in them, and you can query them and show them. It's actually a really nice interface, but they removed capacity from the database, and you can no longer get how big anything is. And they said that they did this for privacy purposes. But right now, so you know, if you have a treatment center that serves one outpatient person or one that serves, you know, 1,000, they're all just 1 point, right? And there's no way to distinguish them. There's no way to actually count the number of beds with the data as a public individual. I'm sure that the city has the data, it just doesn't release them anymore. And they used to, which was unfortunate. Okay, so on November 30th, New York Times reported the opening of supervised drug injection sites in Community Board 11 and 12. These facilities should have qualified for analysis under Fair Share, but they were likely cited using the emergency procurement, which is exempted from Fair Share analysis. If the sites become permanent, Fair Share analysis is supposed to happen when that contract is registered. Contract with the provider is registered, but you know, that's not very useful, because if it's in operation, it's like closing the barn door after the horses have left. The analysis just isn't meaningful. So, you know, in my personal belief is that I believe community boards can be really good partners in the siting of these facilities, because you know your communities better than anyone. You know, like for instance, how is the former retail office space at 104 East 126th Street chosen for the safe injection site? I have no idea. And there's been nothing that's been said of why that place. Is there a better, it isn't city owned, it's privately owned. It's certainly, apparently there's a lease involved. Is there a better location in the community district? Might this be better served by a purpose-built facility? So this is, this building has a certificate of occupancy for retail and office. It's not a health clinic. It is not outfitted that way, or at least it's not according to the certificate of occupancy. Should there be an association with the hospital? Should it be closer to the area's public hospitals? Should it be in the public hospitals? I don't know the answer to these questions, but I think there are questions that maybe should be asked. And then is this a good location for associated services? People using this location will likely need other services. Is this an ideal location for people to use those other services? And you know, the question is that, you know, there are all these questions that the community board could help answer, but no one asked. right? And we all read about this in the New York Times. So that's what I have for you right now. I know that was a lot of information. There's some links in the deck that went around if you want to read stuff for yourself. Again, the Fair Share report is definitely really great to read. You know, I think, you know, it's an issue for discussion. Community board. Right. So that's it, Andrew. That's all I got.
Well, that was a lot. So thank you so much. I definitely learned a lot. You know, like I said, like you said, you know, I thought I knew it. But no, there's a lot more there.
There's a lot there. And if there's questions, you know, I can answer. Best I can.
I know I have a few questions, but I'm gonna let folks go first and kind of query you a bit. Thank you so much for that presentation. I guess, sorry, the one question I will ask, is this something you're going to bring to the full board, or is this just for us here?
Well, I believe this is just for you all. But
Okay.
you know, again, you know, I serve at your pleasure. So
okay, well, just thank you.
You tell me what you want.
Got you. Well, I didn't know what conversation had happened before this. That's why I asked. But okay, right. So Yolanda has her hand up. Yolanda Brown.
George, thank you so much for this presentation. While I didn't know all of this, I am not surprised by any means of the imagination. But seeing that the rules themselves are not adhered to, for want of a better term, how is it that they come about establishing an emergency procurement, which exempts the following of the rules? What classifications, what is determined to classify, let's say, East Harlem in the case of emergency procurement that allows them to continuously to oversaturate the community with various types of facilities?
You know, I think it's an emergency if they say it's an emergency, and that's not a very satisfying answer. I mean, I recognize it's not a very satisfying answer. One of the things, if you read that city council report, it just drips with anger over the abuse of the emergency procurement. But, you know, I also would say this is that, you know, you had a lot of people entering the shelter system, and, you know, there's this legal right to housing in New York. And so if you have all these people entering the system and you don't have enough space for them, you know, I think it's pretty easy to call it an emergency. And that's, you know, it's just, you know,
yeah.
You know, where is it? Where is the line of abuse versus actual emergency? I actually don't know, right? There is a line somewhere, but I will tell you that in 2017, when council wrote that report, they thought it was being abused. Is it being abused now? I honestly, I don't know.
Could I just ask a clarification to that? So you were saying that, oh, you don't really know what the legal parameters of emergency are. Even if someone doesn't get that, as you said, this is the fair share is just a requirement that they do that analysis. There's no, and if it's found at the end, you can shut it down. So if you don't do the okay, fine, they were wrong in the emergency, the city would just probably tell them to go and do the paperwork now that the facility's done. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. But you know, they avoid the public hearing. They avoid you know, telling people about it. They avoid.
So that's what I was going to get at. Yeah. So that's what I was going to get at. Really, is this? I guess the back and forth about this, is this necessarily about the right of the city to do this, or the disclosure around timeline? So I guess I since, unless Yolanda has something else to say here, I just wanted to get into timeline a little more clearly. How does it change from disclosure, like from no disclosure, we find out in the Times, but the way that if an operator were to actually follow the policy as laid out right now, as intended, doing the right thing, what would that look like? Okay. What by from the way this policy is set up, what would be an ideal scenario from the perspective of the community board if the city were to be dotting their I's, crossing their T's?
Right, okay, so I'm gonna actually move on to this little chart right here because it helps me, because it depends on what the action is. So like, for instance, when the borough-based jails went through the process, they had a 216 fair share 216 page fair share analysis that was part of their ULURP application, right? That was like, they dotted every I, they crossed every T, and it was part of their ULURP application, and it was part of a completed ULURP application. So that's like that would be like the kind of gold standard. But the vast majority of these sites would never go through ULURP, right? It's a contract with a service provider, and that would be what they call Article 9 contracts, which is up here in the corner. That never comes to the community board, and the city planning commission holds a public hearing and then votes on the recommended action. That's it. Right now, that hearing, the community board can find out about it and provide testimony, but it's not formally in front of you. You don't have to make a recommendation. You don't have to hold a hearing. So this is like, most of them are right here. There's an extra step there's office space acquisitions, but again, most of them are going to be right here. And then for Article 9 closing, so like if you have a facility and you want to close it or reduce it, or the agency can act without actually doing anything, right? Doesn't have to go through the process. If it's already there and they want to shut it down or expand it, it's okay. They don't have to go through the process. But this is the one where you're going to actually have an opportunity. This is where most of them go. Let me say it that way. So this would be the safe injection site would have been an Article 9 contract. There should have been a hearing, but of course, because it was cited under emergency measures, there wasn't.
I just want to clarify that I heard you right, and I'm going to go to Candy. So you'd say that the gold standard here for dotting I's and crossing T's in the fair share process would be the borough-based jails program.
Yes.
Just
Even
going by
though-
what the policy is. That's not an endorsement on what that was. That is just by the policy of what fair share is. That is profound. Okay, thank you, Candy.
I think that because we went through this before. I don't know if a lot of people remembered, but we went through this before, and I think that part of the problem is that it opened up at a private retail place, right? Where right now, let's say that facility space that is open in the injection site, and that was at a private building owner. So therefore, the one that's going to benefit from that is going to be that building owner or a management company. But at the end of the day, city planning, we should be enforcing city planning to make sure that they post up a good outreach, spend the money in our community, and actually post up in the storefronts over by the new public spaces where there's going to be a lot of people that can be able to see that there is going to be a public holding recommendation, so people can speak up and know exactly what's coming up. We've had these problems in the past, and it seems like we're being taken advantage because everyone is, like, we're not fighting or being aggressive enough to say enough is enough, right? And so when it's going to get to the point that some of us are fighting for that, then a majority turn around and side up with these organizations, either is because of affiliations or because you like the way they work or the people that work with them. But at the end of the day, the ones that really get short-ended is really the residents and the quality of living. Because right about now, and I'm not trying to shy away from the conversation, but today I got an email of people still injecting themselves right outside on Park Avenue with each other, and children are passing by watching that. So even if you have an injection site, you're not controlling the issue. It's still a problem, and there isn't a solution where we didn't get that. We weren't afforded the opportunity to have any type of input. And I think that these kind of things, we have to then put up a resolution and stick by that resolution, because we had one before. And there was a moratorium resolution that we didn't want anymore. Part of our fair share in East Harlem, no more of these programs or anything that's coming in with of substance that is not going to be productive. Or if it's going to be productive, then come back again, do a revisit every 6 months or a whole year or something. But we have a problem and we really need to address it and fix it, because at the end of the day, it's really the private buildings that are allowing this, and they're reaping the benefits because Medicaid is going to be paying for their rent. So now, under that Article 9 contract, I think that we need to speak with city planning and see if they can at least, let us have that public review again,
If I may, so the hearings are announced in the city record. And that's like not very good.
It's not outreach, right? You know what I mean? Is that the public didn't know about it, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's a pop-up. It's like eminent domain with the state. I'm just saying is that we should enforce them to, or at least tell them, you have to put it in front of a barbershop. Put it where people really are gonna see and know that something is coming up, and this is your moment in your time to speak up about it and give your input. That's not being done that way. And not everybody is looking at the internet. Not everybody is still, that the way the outreach is has to be better and it has to be well improved. And that's my opinion and that's my input. And I'm just saying that.
So I saw Beverly and then Yolanda. I'm not sure if that hand is old or new, but I saw Beverly, Yolanda, and Xavier. That's the order that I saw them come up. So Beverly.
Thank you. I want to also address what Candy was saying regarding the landlords. George, thank you for that presentation. It's a lot of information that I wasn't even aware of, but I'm new to everything that's going on in Community Board 11 as a member. But what caught my attention was the CFO for this facility. If you said that the CFO is for retail and office, how are they able to use this as some type of health facility? And would that be to our benefits to use to having this facility moved or not renewed under the private landlord's contract or whatever with this Article 9 contract?
So a building certificate of occupancy can be challenged for sure. This use, I would assume this would be under the zoning resolution as a medical clinic. It would be allowed in this zoning district. So yeah, you could challenge their certificate of occupancy, but they could just update it and get a new one that had the proper use on it. They would just have to properly outfit it. It's allowed under zoning, or if it is a medical clinic, right? Safe injection site is not in the zoning resolution. So
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I would assume they would classify it as medical clinic. But listen, it's a way of opening a conversation, Beverly. I would say is that if the community board has concerns about where this is cited, it's a way of saying, well, all right, it's not being occupied legally, right? And you can start your conversation with powers that be and talk about other places where this could be cited better. Or, again, the idea of is this better for a purpose-built facility, right? Where a new facility is built for the specific use, not like a store. It just doesn't seem right, it's not right under the certificate of occupancy.
Right, and the other thing with it being right across the street from the ABC daycare center, isn't it laws regarding how far this type of facility, even though it's like a new concept for New York City to be using, wouldn't it have the same thing where you can't have a liquor store next to a church or a daycare center? Would that be it?
It's so new, Beverly, there aren't any rules like that.
Right.
right? And so there's another question is, should there be?
Right.
Right? I mean, and the thing is that nobody is going to be asking these questions on the inside. It's going to have to be people like yourself, if you think that these issues are important, you raising them from the outside and making and then the administration responding to them.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Yolanda, that was your hand up?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much. George, again, thank you so much for this conversation. It just seems that whether they're facilities or whether there are vendors, the root problem is at the policy level. And like you said, many of these policies that were enacted for fair share and its various reiterations have died. And so emergency procurement seems to override everything. And so long as they deem something as an emergency usage, they're able to get away to do whatever they want to do. Is a classic case of keeping the community drugged and distracted, giving them the blue pill. So this way we think that everything is fine. And because other countries around the world have begun utilizing some of these injection sites, meanwhile, all the data is not fully conclusive, we find that this is a way to go forward. And it's going to be a hard fight, but it's a fight that I think we should be up for, because again, there aren't any policies, the proverbial they seem to have the better hand on a lot of things, because the policy underlying everything is to keep them drugged and distracted. This is my commentary. Thank you.
Xavier.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, George, for the presentation. Much appreciated. I think in context, looking at this, and I'm sure for most of us in the community board are aware that there was a presentation by Dr. Cunningham at Human Services where there was effusiveness and general obstruction when asked directly if we were being considered, which is why there was a very direct response from our current chair, Nilsa Rama. And we were very put off by the fact that there was an opportunity to disclose if we were one of 5 within the city, when the Bronx has the highest amount of overdoses and Staten Island falls at a high second, and then we fall way below at 25%. We were very dismayed that the opportunity was not taken to discuss the issues of fair share with this particular installation. And there was a unilateral decision, and there is still questions remaining unanswered as whether or not our city charter remit and mandate was adhered to. And the case is there to be made, and whether or not a show of cause can be presented is outstanding. I think it's important for us is to exercise and again, George, thank you very much for laying it bare. I think we have to examine what is our role and what are our responsibilities, and absent of an action that we can take most immediate, is there a need for the city charter to be examined and for us to heighten the role of the community board in this process with a further revision of the city charter? It's a question that I propose to this committee and all of the committees going forward, because I think our democracy is only as good as our civic engagement at the community, at the most community-based level. And I think that will help inform our politicians and our agencies. So I think that's something I appreciate being here and presenting on this and giving us the history. So I would ask this committee and all of the committees to really examine that. And if we don't have the ability to show cause in this particular instance and pushing back and having our fair share throughout the entirety of New York City, then perhaps we should examine a broadening of our role and responsibility in the city model.
Thank you, Xavier. And also thank you for giving us that feedback on what happened in Health and Human Services.
Thank you.
It's, I to me, a couple of things that have stood out in this presentation, just that the emergency usage whether that comes or not, that this policy is still rather toothless, that they can kind of just go back, and correct me if I'm wrong, they could just kind of go back once a judge says something and be like, okay, here we did the analysis, and now it's done. And so I guess, you know, I want to push this committee and, you know, and full board as we move forward to kind of think bigger picture and creatively beyond a specific facility, like what we do here. And I don't have that answer. You know, this specific facility apparently, according to them yesterday on Democracy Now, actually I'm gonna, since I noted this, I'll send it. Apparently 15 lives have been saved. The people who would have otherwise OD'd on the streets, but because they were doing their drugs in the facility, they were met with medical attention. And of course, you know, there's more and more, even worse things getting into those drugs than just the fact that they are consuming poisonous drugs, like things that are bad for their body. The supplies are getting even more poisonous and dangerous. And so, but the reality is no one wants this in their community. And that's why it all ends up in the community with the least amount of political power. And so I want to highlight that city-state divide. George, could you bring up that slide again with the facilities on which are city and which are state?
Yes, one moment.
That was the thing that blew me away, because I've seen a lot of, I didn't know this, that the divide was like this. I knew the state had a really big role here, but I didn't know it was okay. So 5% of the city shelter beds. What was it? Where was the state
Oops,
one?
sorry. Sorry. I lost
No,
my
you're
page.
good.
Yeah.
No, you're good. And the only reason I bring this up is because it's not just, you know, when we talk about this policy, you know, it is, here we go. So all right, East Harlem has 19% of New York State's, is it New York State City
Yeah.
substance abuse?
So New
Let
York
me get a
State.
clarification there.
Right. So New York State substance abuse beds that are in New York City. So they
Okay,
have other
gotcha.
ones outside of New York City.
Right. But I mean, and I guess that's just like, you know, like I know we're the community board, and you know our focus is on city processes, but you know, a lot of folks in this community board, right, we're all involved in all sorts of other things, and we have the right to advocate in front of all of our elected officials here, regardless whether they're city or state. And I think we need to, you know, we have to put a lot of pressure on the state here as well. You know, we need to put pressure on the city to respect the processes that we have now, and think through what would have more teeth than fair share, which clearly doesn't. And also focus on the state, because I just don't, you know, we've got a governor's race coming, right? And all these candidates are going to be asking for support, and that's a key issue. I think people should be pressing these folks on, you know, like, how do you feel about fair share? You know, not just our city council members in wealthier districts willing to take on a fair share, but how do state representatives feel about that are also outside of our district? Because at the end of the day, you know, they put them here because they feel like our electeds can't fight back, and we can push our electeds to fight. But, you know, even the policy as is just so toothless. I can't believe that you said that the fair share, if done right, dotted I's, crossed T's, is the city's jails plan. That to me, that blew my mind. I'm so glad that you put that up. That has been that is one of the most expensive, controversial plans to come through this city in generations. So
I'm going to send you their report. It's like
please.
Really good. They hired outside consultants to do it. It's good.
Yeah, I might have that on an old file somewhere, but send it again, please. Let me see this. I talked a bit, but I just wanted to say, I want to say thank you for the pushback. Pushback, the questions that the Health and Human Services Committee asked, right, on timeline and process, right? Because the process as it is, it's toothless, but it's also important to know, like, well, what did happen, right? Angel mentioned that in his email, and like, I'm someone who's very clear that, like, look, this looks like it's saving lives. Yes, it's in front of, you know, all these uses, but guess what? People are doing drugs right outside my window in front of schools already. But how are we protecting them, and how are we protecting process in this community? How are we being respected as a body? And when I looked at this, our body was completely disrespected. Like, the community board was completely ignored. And I think that's important to get those answers of, you know, not that I want to see the facility kicked out. But I do want to know what should have happened in theory, and what should we in theory be doing moving forward, so that we can have a process that's some semblance of democratic, as Xavier said. Though I don't know what it takes to get there, but that's part of our work, to figure out what would make more sense to us, because as it stands, fair share doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't seem like that, even if fulfilled completely, right, would solve our problem. So I guess that's our homework, to figure out what might, and where does that pressure have to go. I'm sorry for the rant. I'm also talking because I don't see any new hands, unless Candy's hand, was that up from before, or is that a new one?
It's a new one.
Oh, okay, good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I think that I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because, you know, I have to do reports all the time to the state, right? So what happens is that if you have to give constant mid-year and annual reports by the numbers of who you're helping out, right? We should also, and we need to provide outcomes that should be given to us. And we should ask, what is the emergency? How, you know, they're just throwing around emergency procurement. That's like saying affordable housing. Is affordable to who could afford that particular rent, right? So it's the same thing. And it should be defined when there's coming in to put in an application and say, well, we have a procurement emergency. Well, what is your emergency? Demonstrate that to us, that is an emergency, that it merits for us to have any type of programs like that into our community. I'm not saying that we don't, you know, we're not trying to help anybody that is in need, because, you know, I think that being addicted to this type of drug like this, you know, is the one that's really suffering more is the one that is addicted, you know? And I think that they should provide more of a better service to try and get them and weed them out. And I'm not just talking about through the methadone program. There has to be a solution that is going to keep, you know, that's going to help out, but not water down our quality of living. Because I just text to Angel, you know, the pictures. I got pictures today that it was very disturbing, even though they have a site. How are they going to contain that? But at the same time, you know, provide something. Like, we should be afforded to see what merits it to be an emergency. What, you know, like this we need to really have more, give them more accountability and give us more respect and dignity to our community and to the residents as well. And not just only to them, because we need to have everything all in order, and that's not happening. That's just not happening. I don't see what's going to be the outcome. What's the positive outcome to all of this? That we're not seeing that right now. And I understand that it's going to take time, but when you keep continuing to see children are passing by and they're seeing a guy helping another guy inject himself in the neck, and he's assisting him, you know, and they're assisting each other, and there is a site already, you know, like, where's the emergency procurement? I think that is too loose, and it's being taken advantage of, and we need to make that more stricter, at least for our community. Anybody don't want to fight for their community, that's fine. But in East Harlem, Community Board 11 is putting their foot down and is requesting and is stating and demanding that we want to know, what do they consider an emergency procurement? Define that to us and let us see that and put that on a checklist or something. But we got to put the city and the state accountable for it. But we have to be prepared, okay, not to just put it all on the elected officials. That's our problem, because we hire the elected officials. We don't work for them, they work for us. So we have to really put it out there and stand behind them or in front of them and say, this is what we want. You know, my constituents want this, and this is how it's supposed to be. But we have to be the one to take that march and that passionate. I mean, we have people in the movement, and these people paved the way for us. And here we are today in a community board, you know, school boards. We have a lot of accessibility. And now that we have all of this accessibility, there's other stuff happening and evolving. We have to stand up and take a stand on it and be strong about it and challenge the city and the state and say, this is not what we want. And explain to us why you feel we need it in our community. Like, you know, we just can't just be fighting and you know, This is serious here. And if we don't take a stand now, forget about it. We really have to stand behind. Everybody has to really stand together on this. We have to, especially that emergency procurement, because after that it's going to be something else. And then what we're going to be, another dumping ground again. And we're trying to clean house in East Harlem. You know?
Angel, I see your hands up. Well, George, were you
George was first. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Thank you, George, and then Angel. Yeah, I saw that. I didn't know if that was, yes, George and then Angel.
Listen, you know, the only thing I'll say to this is that, you know, very often community boards and their committees are overwhelmed with things that they have to do. You have to hold a hearing on this. You have to discuss this matter, people coming to you. But you can do things, and other community boards do this sometimes. You set your own agenda and you hold your own hearings on things that you want to discuss, that you want to weigh in on, right? So they haven't come to you on this. But if you want to hold a hearing and see what the community says about this, and you want to pass a resolution from this committee on up to the full board for consideration, that's something that you all can do. It doesn't happen often, but it's certainly something that can happen.
Angel.
So I'm glad this conversation is going the way that I had hoped that it would go. That George would do a good presentation and that the committee would be interested. On this question of fair share, I think in the simplest language that I can put it, it's an empty promise that has a very catchy name that I think people have made assumptions about and reach conclusions in their own minds about what it means and the weight that it brings and what the bodies that represent their specific neighborhoods, the weight that they can carry, because of that title. And I think that tonight's presentation and furthering an understanding of what fair share currently is, what it really is amongst our membership and amongst our community, I think can help us reset what those expectations are, and then push us towards making recommendations for ways that this can be fixed. And by we I mean like all community boards, right? It's an undermining of the whole intent of a community board. It's to plan for its community. But if if community boards are going to be circumvented, they're not going to be consulted, if they're not going to be considered, then what's the point of a community board? And for some that may be just fine, but I think for those of us that are associated with community boards, that can't stand. Fair share needs to have teeth. There has to be something or some other title that actually fulfills the promise that the fair share I guess made to us by using that title. Because otherwise, those with power, as it was alluded before, are going to avoid their share, and communities such as this are going to continue to be overburdened with responsibility for, society's ills, not just this community's ills. It's just what it is, not just East Harlem people are afflicted this or that way. We certainly have our share, but we certainly don't have all of them, and we certainly don't have most of them. But the impact of, citing all kinds of facilities in communities like this, cannot be ignored. Like there are consequences, and, perhaps not intended, but there are consequences, and there are, weights put on communities that then communities have to resolve, that have to carry, and issues that communities have to resolve on their own with no assistance. Like there's nobody coming to help us, pick up the street or pick up the needles or do anything. They just put it there and then hope for the best, and then I'll talk to you later. And that's unfortunate, right? Because it doesn't help the community. It doesn't necessarily help the people being served as well as it could. You have to consider, I would think, you would all agree, you have to consider who you're helping and the environment that you're helping them in when making decisions. So like the latest thing that's captured our attention is the safe injection site, but this holds true for all kinds of other things that have been placed in our community and in other communities like ours. Like that's why you have planning, right? Like that's why George has a career, right? Because the idea of planning was come up with 1,000,000 years ago to say, hey, we shouldn't have certain uses. We should be thoughtful about certain uses, where we put certain uses. And, that's being circumvented, currently. And then the last thing I'll say is this latest experience has really shown a light on how broken the process is as it relates to community boards. I've said it in an email and I'll say it again now, because it has to be recorded and it has to be on the record. The community board was lied to directly multiple times with no kind of shame, no pause, no nothing, like they say in Spanish, sin pelo en la lengua, they just did it. And that's wrong. Like you all are volunteering your time to come and work for the betterment of your community. And, the least that can be done is to come and have a conversation. We're thinking of doing the following. Let's talk about that. What do you think? Let me explain. But to not do that, to choose to not do that, because it was a choice, is reprehensible. And that should not stand, and it shouldn't be allowed to stand. And I'm hoping that this experience, while we're all hot, can motivate us to start making, really interesting and creative, and thoughtful, and, reasonable and rational recommendations for how to improve this entire process, both the fair share and also the political process that, contributed to the decision to not consult us.
Thank you for that comment. And then also, I recall in our, I think it was, what month are we? Where are we? It was in our October or November meeting, right? Because this facility only opened up like a week ago. Something, it might have been our November full board. You, Angel, were mentioning, you were like, hey, there's this thing coming down the pike. City's not being honest about it. And you were on the record like, yo, they told us nothing's happening. I don't believe them for a second. And I think as someone who's born and raised in this community, like that was the main thing that got my goat about this. I've been very clear about, my belief that harm reduction makes sense. But no matter what you're talking about, this is just how communities like ours are treated, and consistently. And this has happened on this issue, on how many. Part of the reasons why I ignored going to community board meetings, then eventually joined up for the community board, is just, part of what's always driven my activism is just like the anger at being treated in that way, just like completely ignored and directly lied to, and like, okay, well, fine. So I just wanted to thank you for just being attentive, because I know you noted you weren't sure what was coming up, but you were like, something's happening and they're not telling us the truth. And that's on the record, I think, for November's meeting. Beverly.
Yes, you brought up the city record and how that's not a publication that is given to everybody or is widely known. Is it any way that as board members we get free access to the city records? Because this is not the first time that the city has done something. We're putting it in this type of publication where the majority of people don't see it or hear about what's going on in their own community. They did this with the Till buildings also. So I'm thinking they're using this to say, oh yeah, well, we did give a notice, but we're giving it to a notice to a publication that nobody gets. So it would be really to our advantage to have a subscription, each member to have a subscription to that at the city expense, since they're putting all this information in there just to try to, put things in through the back door without our knowledge of it, and say later on, oh yeah, we did make a notice of that. My second thing is regarding this emergency procurement. Who's in charge of that? I mean, who are the quote unquote they that makes this decision? And if it's our elective officials on the state level or local level, then they need to come and talk to us as to, especially for this this issue about this injection site, and come and talk to us as to what hand that they have in it, what if they had a hand in it for or against it. I think they need to talk to us also. And one more thing, the breakdown that, George, that you said about the 19% and 11% of the city states, is it, I don't know how to compare that to other community boards. You know, is there any way we can see what the other community boards have? And if, and you mentioned also, because a lot of this is, we're not number one, is because, well, we got so much because we have not Rikers Island, Ward's Island over here, and compared to what the Queens have with Rikers Island. So, you know, is there any way we can see the comparison between other community boards with these type of facilities? Thank you very much for, again, for this presentation. It was very eye-opening.
I'm glad to hear that. If I can answer the questions as best I can. The city record is a publication of the City of New York. It is essentially every hearing notice, every procurement, everything goes in it, right? And it's, the idea is that you know, it's for transparency purposes, but it's like enormous and full of stuff that nobody cares about. And so it's not, it's like, it's getting the city record and then, you know, perusing through it to see if you could find a hearing notice is just not very effective. What would be effective if the Department of City Planning or the City Planning Commission notified community boards when there was an action that they were taking or a hearing that they were holding on an item in their district. And as far as I'm aware, they don't do that. They should, right? It shouldn't be on you to comb through the city record to find out when the hearing is going to be, right? I mean, it's your community district. You should be notified of it. Who decides on the emergency procurement? I'm going to speculate because I don't know, but you know, the administration, it's a strong mayor, right? And so ultimately it's the mayor's decision, but his deputy mayors, right? And deputy mayors of Health and Human Services is probably the person that signed the form that's called this an emergency declaration. And they do this with zoning overrides. They do this with a lot of things where they're not following the rules, but they want to do it anyway. And so they sign a piece of paper to make it happen. So it's probably, again, the Health and Human Services deputy mayor, whoever that is. I don't actually know who that is. And then how do we compare to different boards? Now, this is the thing. I had expected my presentation to be full of maps and tables showing you how East Harlem compared to the other community districts. I couldn't do that. The only thing I had is a couple of maps that was published in 2017 by the City Council. And I couldn't do that because, again, the city has removed the capacities of their facilities from their database so that we can't make those comparisons. And I think that is intentional. They say it's for privacy purposes, but I don't think, maybe it is, I don't know, but I think primarily it's to keep you all in the dark about how bad the fair share is. Right? Not you, the East Harlem, but everybody, right? Everybody in New York City, because if knowledge is power, right? If we give you this information and you say, hey, what's going on here? Look at the data. And they would have to respond to that. If they don't give you the data, and you can't make those comparisons, Beverly, it's a problem, right? You know, we know that people in this discussion seem to know that there's a problem, but we don't have the numbers to back it up, other than these older ones that are 4 years old.
I really appreciate you mentioning that too, because I saw a bunch of maps that were flowing around on social media by people who were upset by this, and I was looking at them and I was like, I don't know what the source is, and they weren't specific on the number of people, and so it looked like, and I know there's an over concentration here, but I was like, this doesn't, like, I was like, I can't share any of that. I don't know where that's from, and I appreciate, but I was wondering, well, where did that map, like, how did, and I could, okay, so now it's difficult to get that information in part because the city obscures it. So I appreciate you highlighting that.
Again, they will tell you where the facilities are. They won't tell you the number of people they serve. So if you have a doctor with an outpatient clinic with serving 5 people, like as part of their practice, or 10,000 people, it's going to appear exactly the same in the data.
So there was something that you mentioned. I just wanted to clarify really quick. You said just if you could clarify the types of facilities that like the list of facilities that all go under fair share when we're talking about fair share. What is that? Because you spoke about thinking that, you know, the logic behind fair share, if we don't necessarily think the policy makes a ton of sense, but if we think that the logic makes sense, that there should be some sort of analysis in that way. You mentioned in your presentation, you thought that actually that should be expanded. I was just wondering if you just had a list of what is covered, because you mentioned the things it wasn't.
Yeah, so it's a lot of city facilities and also facilities that the city contracts with. So it doesn't have to be owned or operated by the city. It would be contractor as well. So homeless shelters, prisons, things like outpatient clinics for mental health, outpatient clinics for substance abuse, alcoholism, inpatient clinics, so residential beds. You know, they have this measurement called residential beds, which lumps in things like shelters with prisons, which makes the analysis that they do ridiculous because they're very different. They're actually very different in terms of their nature, right? A shelter bed is not the same as a jail, right? They're different, and they shouldn't be lumped in together when they do the analysis, which is what they do. And so the couple things that you might think would be like schools aren't, because there's certain exemptions because of there's certain exemptions, but as they describe in the report, the city council report, it's basically everything the city operates or everything the city operates or contracts to operate that's over 750 feet square feet in size, with a few carve outs, like schools and a few other things that are carved out for a reason, but not things that are capital, right? So, you know, improvements to roads, improvements to affordable housing, you know, things like that, subsidies for affordable housing, like that. That's not part of it. It's like, it's for operating facilities. Does that make sense?
It does.
We can, if you want the whole list, like seriously, I mean, if you all are gonna like put this on an agenda and try to have you know, a hearing on it, or maybe invite speakers from the city to come and talk more about this, we can get you, you know, more detail on any of this stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a need to just better understand what it is we're talking about, because I learned a lot about the policy today that I did not know. And I'm sure that many of our community members who feel all sorts of ways about all this don't know that either. And that there's a lot more to learn if we're actually, if folks are actually thinking about intentionally making some sort of policy recommendations. Does anyone have anything else that they want to offer on this item? Thank you. I just saw you sent your presentation over, George. Thank you.
No, the presentation was sent earlier. That's the fair share analysis for borough-based jails.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have that way in the back of my old files, but I'll double check that. Oh wow, this is, yeah, they went through it. It's over 100 pages. Yeah. And yeah, I think that again just implores us to think, you know, do we as an intervention, do we feel like we're trying to give fair share more teeth, or make sure people follow fair share, or think in some other way? Who knows? I mean, it's clear what's happening now doesn't work. So
yes,
I think that to some degree should free us to being creative and thinking and talking with our neighbors as well, and older heads in this community who, you know, have been through it. You know, I benefit a lot from talking to older heads who've been through it, and, you know, can tell me, yeah, I tried that, or it used to be this way. Find out about some old arcane bureaucratic process no one knew about. Does anyone have any other thoughts? There's one other item of old business. Does anyone else want to make a comment on this before we move forward. Okay, Angel, did you have anything else for us before we move to the next item?
Um, and
Oh, so that was a no. You had nothing else on that agenda item.
oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was unmuted. Yeah, no, that was a no. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. my bad.
I would just I would say you should definitely send that fair share around. I would love the community board to be able to benefit from all the work that you've done, the whole board.
It'll be
So
posted on our website right after this
great.
meeting.
Review of budget requests and committee work. So provide more housing for special. So this was an item for old business. Angel, do you want to kind of touch back on why why folks wanted to touch back on this item?
Sure, I'll be brief because this was an Elsie ask. Elsie wanted to touch on this last month, and I don't think we got a chance to. Just putting the existing request from this committee back in front of the committee, as you know, we continue as the board continues its advocacy for its budget requests, to not lose sight of them and to continue considering these requests as we move forward through the budget process. She just wanted to put that before you guys to spark a conversation. That's all I have on it. And there were 3 requests that came from land use. They're large, so I put them each on one slide.
So she just wanted us to go through these again and just confirm that we're still interested in these, or to gather more specificity around these?
So to start having a conversation, because it's like the thinking is it's a year-long process to start thinking about, like, is this something we still want? Do we want to refine these? What are we doing with these requests other than including them on the list? How are we advocating for them? Are these goals being achieved? She was thinking that it's more appropriate that this be a year-long conversation, a regular conversation throughout the year versus just submission and then kind of walking away. Just trying to keep an eye on the ball.
Makes a lot of sense.
So if you'd like me to slide through these or just to refresh people's memories, you guys can decide how you want to discuss it tonight or whether you just want to punt until the next month. It's up to you all.
So I'll read them out in case anyone's just on the phone, and then give people a minute to jog their thoughts, and then after I read out, see if anyone has any thoughts they want to provide. If not, we can slide.
Okay.
So provide more housing for special needs households such as seniors or the formerly homeless. Provide funding for the development of affordable housing at deeper levels of affordability, targeting households living under 30% of AMI, the developmentally disabled, those living with mental illness, and homeless veterans. Okay. Candy has a question. Candy?
So we're going to, because I missed last month's meeting. So LC, I agree that we should constantly be hammering HPD, HDC, HUD, everybody, the powers of be that provide doing these AMIs and the formula of it. They have to come back and revisit that formula and make sure that households living under the 30% AMI, what that's somebody that's getting $549 a month, can't even afford to get an apartment and they disabled, or even getting $245 a month. It's impossible for them to get an apartment anywhere. And it's awful when you're seeing people that they need this service, they need a place to stay. We need to really press it, like somehow. We don't have the answers to everything, but if we keep imposing on it and tell them come back and give us, a better deal. I understand the whole housing infrastructure, the nuts and bolts and everything of it. I understand how that all works, but I know that somehow something's got to work that there, it has to, you know, these are residents, these are human beings as well, and they also have a right to live and have affordable housing. That's when we have to define affordable, is when we're trying to say the deeply low of the lowest, you know, and we have to continue to put that in as one of our community needs, you know, and see how even developers can come up with something. But the truth is, the matter is, it's really governmental. You know, it's really from there. They're the ones that set they're the ones that set the AMIs. They're the ones that constantly change every year. Every year, they constantly change what is the amount of rents going up and what are the limits, the income limits. So we need to address that and have someone from HUD to come over to us, someone from the low income tax credit to talk to us about it on a federal level. You know, we need to invite these people in and talk to us and explain to us, how do they come up with that formula to make it think that this, like, people don't have, you know, what the reality, because this is reality. People are living like that. And I don't know where in their back end of the mind, or who's there in their offices making all these plans and creating and stating what is affordable at the area medium income level. Even at the census is off, you know, but they do know how much people are receiving in Social Security. They do know how many people they have living under substandard living. They have all of that data, but we need to have them to come in here and explain to us how that formula, how they come up with that formula, because we just implement it, but it's how they come up with it, and explain that to us. Give us the math, because I would love to see that.
I just wanted to clarify. So the area median income, and this is something that's always been a point of contention for a lot of housing advocates, the area median income is actually the tri-state area and a couple of outerlying wealthy districts, right? It is not the area median income of our neighborhood. So that could perhaps be something that we push and say, hey, when we're talking about area median income, we mean our own area median income. That could be a conversation. But I just wanted to clarify that, to my understanding, that is how that is still unfortunately done.
But it's just also how they plan, like the affordability per units, you know, and it's all by income. And I understand that that's how it's going to pay the mortgages and all that kind of stuff. But we really have to keep in mind that if we're going to also fight for about housing is a right, then we also have to make sure that it's going to be equal to people of the lowest, under the 30% area medium income. And if we have to separate ourselves from Westchester County, from you know, all these other tri-state areas, we need to be the one to tell them, let's just, you know, separate it, because the reality is that people living under 30% AMI they're not going to find somewhere to live.
Beverly.
I'm just trying to think out of the box. Could the emergency procurement help in this procedure? I mean, like, really, if you're gonna use that, use it for something like this. You know, I mean, come on. I'm just like, since I've known this term now, I'm gonna see how else it can help us, and in getting housing that's affordable. I mean, if whoever they are that's putting this or writing this letter and signing their name to this emergency procurement, let it be for something like this. Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Okay, unless George has a clarification there, or anyone else has another comment. Move on.
I like the thinking, but I'm not sure how easy it is to implement.
Okay, so number 2, unless anyone has any other thoughts or movement on that. Okay. Provide more housing for extremely low and low income households. There remain many vacant properties or underutilized residential buildings in East Harlem. It is imperative that the community, elected leaders, and HPD work collaboratively to create the necessary incentives for private property owners to upgrade and maintain their properties for active residential use. Newly developed or rehabilitated apartment buildings must include a balance of mixed low-income units that also include a percentage of units for low and extremely low income households. This seems in the same vein of our previous conversation. Any thoughts before we, Beverly?
Yes. What thing I don't, well, I don't know if it's going to be in the next slide or whatever, but home ownership also has to be a part of this process, you know, for people of low income. That's why I was pushing so much for the last two buildings that's in the TIL program on community board be funded 100%, because they've been working for this opportunity for over 20 years. So I am glad that we're able to now think about keeping these type of projects year round in our thought pattern. But also home ownership has to be a part of this for low income housing, for low income incomes. It has to be a part of it. Thank you.
Okay, I see Candy's hand, and yeah, Candy.
I know you guys are probably gonna be tired of me by the time the night is over, but I guess I'll make up. This is making up for last month. No, seriously, the vacancy properties. I've spoken to a lot of building owners, and their takeaway is that they pay less taxes when they have vacancies. Okay, my takeaway is that the city should actually work with giving them the incentive, which is really giving them a tax break, because property tax is too exuberant, it's too high in East Harlem, and water tax as well. So I think that if they, there's got to be a win-win situation here. And I think that if they work with some type of incentive that is not going to be a bigger burden to them, then work with the landlords, and the property owners rather, not, because you have management agencies, but and giving them some type of an incentives on a tax break, and what that, by that I mean is the property tax, water tax, because the minute you turn that faucet on, that's it. That meter goes, and they're very unforgivable. The city will not. It's very rare you hear a city giving a break to a property owner to forgive them for even late fees or whatever it is. That's not happening. And I don't know how many homeowners we do have on the land use or even in the community board as a whole. And I can tell you that I'm sure they can agree with what I'm trying to say here. And there has to be a win-win, because then this is the way you will get all these buildings that are empty, and they rather have not pay the taxes and just have the vacancy on it, rather than to fix it up and then have tenants. So I think that's something that we really, that's a discussion for HPD to talk with the Department of Finance, and the property owners, and I'm sure the real estate board can understand and agree. I'm just looking at it that it can work as two ways, and it'll be a win-win situation, so that's a conversation that can be had, but I'm just sharing my thoughts.
Okay, Jessica has her hand raised.
Thank you. I don't have much to say, but I just wanted to say that I'm glad that the vacant properties are mentioned in this, and that we should continue to advocate for responsibilities or restrictions or follow through with whoever owns these vacant properties, and what they're doing, so that we know what's coming in our neighborhood. That's all. Thank you.
Great. And now, unless anyone has any other thoughts, number 3. Okay, increase community board training, including on core land use process and practices. Provide funding for digital ULIRP trainings as well as outreach to promote the new trainings in East Harlem. These trainings would educate the community on how to engage with the new digital ULIRP process and make their voices heard in the land use development process, including affordable housing creation for East Harlem. Does anyone have any thoughts on this one? I know in regards to this item, we actually just have to follow up. Supposedly there is funding for this, but we're not sure the degree to which that is actual or not. But if it is, the question then becomes, who would go to these? Who on our committee would be interested? Who in our community would be interested? Who would have the time and capacity to actually go? So this is a follow-up we should do before our next meeting, but that question remains open to the board and to the public, who would find this something worthwhile, so that we go in knowing that there will be bodies at such an event. Jessica has her hand raised.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to note that in my personal opinion, I think we should be advocating more for increased community training on land use processes and the community board in general, because it seems that there's a misconception about what community boards are and whether we're elected or paid or if we live in this community. And I think in order to be more effective and to have effective involvement of the community on things that their opinions are necessary for, they need to be knowledgeable and educated about these processes, as do we as community board members. But I think that we have a good amount of training available to us that probably not everyone accesses all the time. So I would suggest that we edit this in the future.
To make it for what is the specific edit you'd suggest?
I would suggest that instead of increased community board training, that we say increased community engagement and education and resources allocated to the community boards and staff for these processes.
Yeah, I think that's a great addition. Really, that I think it would even behoove us to have, if not editing this item, but another item for emphasis, really just having that funding for staff that understands these processes, that can not only explain it to us, but if we have a public meeting or hearing, could also explain it to the community. George James is valuable as a resource. He's but he's only one person and only here, in part of his capacity. And so yeah, I completely agree. I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts with regards to this. Would we want to just make a quick amendment here to or addition to say that we also want increased resources for could I just get your language one more time, Jess?
Sure. And I don't think we have to take any action on this, but that we're just discussing.
You were just putting it out there. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
and
we don't.
I also
Yeah,
taking
we
notes,
don't.
so
Yeah.
I wrote it down.
Oh, okay.
I can repeat it though if you'd like.
No, that's fine. It's on the record. If you don't feel like taking action on it tonight, we don't have to. I just wanted to. It's on the record. But yeah, on the record, I think it's a good idea as well. And it'll also give us more clarity as we move forward with DCP on this. Does anyone else have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Jessica, and doing outreach and letting, like if someone from this, when we take our classes for, we refresher or whatever it is for the ULIP hearings, classes, given by the borough president, which is a good thing, that we receive these courses. And I think that once we provide the public and showing them how is that process, So like that, when we do have the public hearing, they're more versed and they're more aware of what are the nuts and bolts, what they can, I think they can ask much better, be well informed, first of all, and educated. So like that, when the developers are coming before us, or even city planning, the public is more or less aware, at least those that do attend, we're giving the community as a whole, not just community board members, but the community as a whole, an opportunity to be educated on how this process really works. You said there is fundings for that. We have that line item in Community Board 11? It was given to us? Or is it just the city as a whole?
So to clarify, it was not, but the response was apparently that they could do this within existing resources. And so it's incumbent upon us to follow up and say, oh, cool. So are we doing that? But if we do that, Jess was mentioning that this should really be for the broader community, right? Because we get a lot more access and exposure to this sorts of information, and we have George here. But we have to make sure that we're saying DCP should be talking to the community. We should be talking with the community and make sure that like there's people DCP will talk to. The other piece that Jess just mentioned was also just having increased funding for those types of folks with that expertise, so that they can not just meet our community board, but also our community members where they're at.
As part of it, as an educational piece,
Right, but if we
community
move forward,
awareness.
right, but if we're telling DCP, hey, we got to do XYZ, we also it would be silly if we say that we would like them to do this, we have it all set up and no one comes. That would be the best case scenario, where DCP is actually being honest and there is this funding and they do want to do this, right? But we have to do our end as well.
It's true, but you know what, Andrew, it's really all about community outreach. If we really do the outreach and poster up and put the information where there's a lot of foot traffic, that people are able to see it, I think that, if we don't try it, we wouldn't know, right? So I'm just saying that if there's funding for it, and there is, why not try at least one time? If it doesn't work, okay, at least we can say we tried,
I just want to say a couple things that just for the record. Angel did mention that home ownership, this is in reference to a previous item in this segment, home ownership is included in our affordable housing development guidelines. But then also, yes, the work we're talking about, the work that we recognize as a need and that we're hoping DCP can put forward is in theory within also the purview of the New York City Civic Engagement Commission. They are in theory supposed to be doing some of this work as well. So.
Supposed to be. He said the right word.
I just said it. I just said that's part of their purview. So
no, I'm saying that's what Angel said, supposed to. So I'm just saying.
Yes, we are all
emphasizing it, that they're supposed to.
Pero también the other part is supposed to, right? We couldn't, that's a great suggestion by Jessica. Maybe we could invite them to come and just explain maybe what they do. Or to give a specific presentation on this. If that's something that's of interest, I'm sure Angel would not mind making that reach out. Does anyone have any other thoughts before we move forward? Okay, well then, it would appear, so that's old business. Does anyone have any new business? Okay, so do we want to do a roll call before we get out of here? Oh, I just wanted to, sorry, just want to say, I see a public attendee, just Jewel Jones. What did she say? She just said, thank you, it was very informative. Thank you all for your service to the community. Requested a copy of the slide so I can share it with my neighbors. Oh no, this was Jane. I apologize. This was Jane Murphy. Thank you for taking the time to sit through that. I never saw your hand up. Do you want to share anything with the committee, or that was it? Those are the only remarks that you wanted to share. Jane Murphy. Could you unmute her, Angel, just to see? Because I just. Oh, those are only remarks. Never mind. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were acknowledged and say thank you. These are very long meetings sometimes, and they can get kind of wonky. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, we gave our thanks to you for sticking through it. We can do roll call now.
Sure.
Everyone's favorite roll call.
Yep, I'll do that in a second. The presentation I just wanted to
Oh.
mention is going to be posted to the website along with the agenda for this meeting. So you can find it there. I'll do it in the morning because I'm going to bed after this.
Amen.
Yolanda Brown,
Present.
Jessica Elliott,
Present.
Elsie is excused. James Horton,
Present.
Ivy's excused. Beverly Pavone,
Present.
Andrew Padilla,
Present.
Robert is excused. Finney's absent. Jason's excused. Candy,
Present.
thank you. Yep, you have quorum.
Thank you to everyone for getting quorum here. Do we have a motion for for going home? Candy,
Don't need it.
do we have the votes to get out of here? We do.
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
Aye.
Hope y'all have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Great meeting.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
All right, y'all.